Welcome to the Meditation Nest. Here, bedtime stories become gentle meditations, designed to help your thoughts unwind as you slow the tempo of your life and embrace the night ahead. I invite you to slow your breath, soften your thoughts, and find peace as you listen. This is your time to rest, reflect, and dream. Greetings! Tonight I bring you a reflective tale called The Paper Mill. If your mind feels too loud to let you rest, come away for a little while. Step out of the bright, hurried current of the day and into a quieter flow, a brookside workshop where every stray thought can be softened, pulped, and remade into something blank and peaceful. Settle your body where you are. Let your shoulders relax. Let your eyes grow heavy. Breathe in as if you are drawing cool air off moving water. Breathe out as if you are laying your worries gently onto that water, watching them float away. And we begin the tale of the paper mill. By the time Pamela, known as PJ to her friends, walked out the back door of her office, her ears rang with the leftover chaos from the day. Numbers, messages, the echo of raised voices, the flicker of her monitor, the tiny delay before each page appeared, the sense that something was out of reach. It all clung to her like faint static under the skin. The air on the other side of the door met her with a gentler sound, a low, even rush. Water pulled along stone, the creak of timber turning in a rhythm as old as the mill itself. PJ paused at the top of the short slope. Below, the paper mill sat where it always had, pressed close to the curve of the brook, as if the building listened to the water. Weathered planks, a roof that dipped a little in the center, windows holding warm amber light. Beside it, half in the brook, the water wheel turned. The wooden paddles dipped, lifted, and emptied in a slow, deliberate cycle. Each rise caught the current. Each fall returned it in a soft cascade that darkened the stones along the bank. The axle slid through an opening in the wall, carrying its steady power inward, into belts and shafts and grinding stones she knew well. The noise of the office faded notch by notch. It always did at this point. PJ walked down the path, boots finding the familiar give of soil mixed with stray pulp. The air cooled as she descended, brushed with a fine mist, rising where the brook leapt over a low ledge. Tiny droplets touched her face and the hollow at the base of her throat. She breathed in and tasted water, wood, and something faintly bitter, wet fiber and old bark. The mill carried a scent that clung to her even when she left it. Damp timber, linen rag, a trace of iron from old tools. It settled low in her chest rather than high in her head. After a day under recycled air and blue light, it felt like the first real thing she'd taken in. At the foot of the slope, she stepped onto the narrow platform that wrapped along the side of the building. To her left, the brook ran quick and narrow, its surface a restless wave of small ripples. To her right, the wall of the mill rose close enough to touch, boards dark with age. PJ stopped by the railing near the wheel and rested her palm on the wood. A faint tremor of motion climbed into her bones, the wheel turning, the axle rolling, the quiet insistence of work that knew neither hurry nor delay. This was where her day truly divided. Above, in the office, time had felt sharp and thin, sliced into units by emails and deadlines. Down here it thickened, changed shape. It moved with the wheel and the water. It folded and unfolded in loops. She listened to the wheel's voice, a creak, an inhale as the paddles took in the brook, a soft spill back into the narrow channel. The pattern was slow enough to follow, steady enough to lean on. Without effort, her breath moved to match it. In, paddles rise. Out, waterfalls. On the third cycle, her shoulders had dropped. On the fourth, the tight ring behind her eyes eased. On the fifth, the buzzing that had filled her head since morning faded to the barest trace. The world beyond the brook remained. Traffic, messages, an unfinished list on a desk. It felt farther away, though, as if the water had drawn a clear line between here and there. Here there was water, wheel, wood, and the work. PJ gave the railing a light tap with her knuckles, an old habit, and moved toward the door. The worn latch fit her hand. She lifted it and stepped into the dim, warm air of the mill. Behind her, the wheel turned on, pulling the brook through its endless circle, carrying the day's noise farther downstream, making room inside the workshop for quieter things. Inside, the air closed gently around her. Light came through wide windows and a few hanging lamps. Shadows of belts and beams moved along the walls as the water wheel's rotation passed through the building, turning other wheels in a slow chain. The smell met her. Damp wood, wet fiber, a faint trace of old grain. The aroma reached into her chest and settled there, heavier than office air, yet somehow kinder. She crossed the entry and stepped into the pulpery, the heart of the operation. Along one wall stood a row of tubs, each filled with water and pale fibers. Linen and cotton torn into small pieces, edges softened by soaking. In the center, 2 great grinding stones turned against each other, worn smooth. The upper stone moved in a slow circle, pushed by gears that traced back to the wheel outside. The lower stone held still, anchored to the floor, its surface grooved from countless revolutions. Between them, in the narrow space where their faces met, the raw material of the day passed. PJ slipped off her jacket, hung it on the usual peg, and rolled her sleeves. The sounds here were deeper than the creak of the wheel outside. A low rumble from the stones, a quiet lap from the vats, the occasional clink of a stray button caught before it could enter the works. She moved to the nearest tub and trailed a hand through the water. Strips of old cloth brushed her fingers, soft, pliable, nearly ready. She gathered a handful, water dripping back as she lifted, and felt the weight of it. Fabric that had once carried ink, sweat, perfume, grocery lists, love notes, bills. All of it now returned to a simple state. She fed the damp strips into the mouth of the grinder, spacing them with care. The opening accepted each offering, rolling the cloth inward between stone and stone. PJ watched it disappear, then turned to the trough where the first trickle of slurry appeared. Thick, pale, clouded at the edges. It spilled out in a slow ribbon and spread into the channel below, swirling with gentle insistence. This was the part of the day where her thoughts came up the loudest. Hands busy, mind no longer pinned to screens. As the cloth vanished into the stones, memories from the office rose. The unfinished email, the bright meeting room, the offhand remark that had settled under her ribs, a worry about tomorrow's figures, a question about whether she had done enough, explained enough, been enough. The thoughts arrived in strips, much like the rag in her hands. She let them appear one by one, like pieces laid out. Then, in the quiet of the pulpery, she gave them names with no blame attached. Here was the list that ran too long. Here was a doubt in someone else's voice. Here was the fear that always tried to leap ahead. PJ took another handful of wet fiber, felt its cool between her fingers, and sent it into the grinding stones. In her mind, those thoughts followed, wrapped around the cloth at first, then loosening under the patient pressure. The stones did their work. Rough texture gave way, edges frayed, threads separated. What had once been fixed became a clouded suspension of tiny pieces, each one carried in water, each one losing its hard outline. In the trough, the slurry grew smoother, fewer lumps. A soft, even consistency emerged. When she ran a paddle through it, a steady resistance met her hand rather than jolts. She thought of her mind under slow, constant kindness, how repeated gentle passes over the same old stories could wear away their sharp corners. The grinding here was weight and time and rhythm, the mill's way of saying, "You can let this change." PJ dipped her fingers into the slurry and lifted them back out. Pale pulp clung, then slid back in a slow ribbon. She watched the line it made before the water folded over it. Each piece fed to the stones, took a little of her mental clutter with it. The stray regret, the unnecessary replay, the vague dread that had sat at the base of her throat. Turn, grind, spread. By the time the last of the day's rag had passed through, PJ felt a quieter space in her chest. The worries weren't gone, yet they had changed form, less solid, less separate, suspended in something larger and more fluid. She wiped her hands and looked toward the settling tanks, where the slurry would go next, toward stillness, toward shape, toward the possibility of something blank and new. Inside, the grinding stones turned on, steady as a heartbeat. Outside, the brook fed the wheel. When she stepped away from the pulpery, she carried less than what she had brought in. PJ entered the quieter half of the mill. Here the motion of belts and stones faded to a distant murmur. The room held softer light, poured through high windows that looked toward the trees and evening sky. In the center stood a wide vat where the slurry arrived and settled. She walked to the edge and looked down. The surface moved in slow, cloudy swirls. Tiny flecks of fiber turned and drifted, wrapping, loosening. The water, once clear, now carried all the days behind it, cloth and ink reduced to a gentle suspension. It always surprised her how calm the vat felt after the grind. The low growl of the pulpery softened here to a quiet lap against wooden sides. PJ reached for the mold and decal leaning against the wall, a frame strung with fine screen, with a second frame that defined the edges. She slipped it into the vat at an angle, then leveled it beneath the surface. Fibers brushed the mesh like rain on cloth. For a moment, she held still, arms submerged to the wrist, feeling the cool weight of water rest across her hands. The pulp settled over the screen in a thin, even layer, drawn there by gravity and the steady pattern of her movement. Her thoughts, noisy earlier, now felt more like the vat, one field rather than many scattered pieces. The outlines of individual worries had blurred, present but no longer pressing from every side. She lifted the mold and decal together. Water streamed through the screen, clear again as it fell back into the vat. The layer that remained on the mesh held together, fragile, wet, yet coherent, a single sheet in the making. She watched the excess drip away and felt a small, steady satisfaction rise. The mess of fibers, like the mess of her day, had come to rest somewhere. They had agreed to belong to something larger. With practiced hands, she tipped the frame toward the waiting felt on the table. In one smooth motion, she couched the wet layer, screen down, then a press, then a lift. The pulp released, clinging now to the felt in a pale, even rectangle. Edges clean, surface whole. This was the part she trusted, the moment when motion accepted shape. She set the mold and decal aside and smoothed a hand once over the new sheet. The texture was delicate. Fibers lay in crossings she could not see, yet could feel. She laid another felt on top, ready for the next sheet. Then another. Outside, the brook kept its clear tune. Inside, the day's ground down pieces became quiet, unified forms, waiting for what came next. The stack of fresh, wet sheets grew one layer at a time, each pressed between felt. When the pile reached the right height, PJ slid her hands beneath and lifted with care. The weight always surprised her. Water, fiber, and the quiet gravity of so many small changes, resting together. She carried the stack to the press. The press stood against the far wall, a frame of heavy beams. A broad plank waited beneath a thick screw that descended from above, its threads dark with age. This part of the mill had its own voice, a deep groan when the handle turned, a faint crack of fibers settling, the subdued sigh as water released into the trough. PJ laid the stack in place, aligned it by touch, then eased the plank on top. She took the handle and began to turn. The screw lowered, the plank pressed down, and pressure spread through the pile in a slow circle. Felt and pulp accepted the weight without complaint. Clear water slipped out along the edges and into the waiting channel, where it gleamed in the lamplight. She thought of how the day had pressed on her earlier, sharp and uneven. This felt different. This pressure had purpose. It encouraged the sheets to let go of what they no longer needed. After a final turn, the press rested. When she lifted the plank away, the stack had changed. It was thinner and more defined. PJ peeled back the first felt. A sheet lay beneath, pale, damp, and firm. It held together when she lifted one corner. The surface caught the light in soft patterns, the way calm water reflects a dim sky. She carried it to the drying racks. Hemp lines stretched across a warm, airy space in the upper part of the mill. A vented window faced the brook, letting in a mild draft that smelled of water and leaf. One clothespin at the top edge, then another. The sheet hung with its own slight weight, edges soft, surface quiet. She repeated the motion, one sheet after another, until the lines held a row of pale rectangles, swaying lightly. The room felt different with them there, emptier of sound, fuller of something like possibility. She thought of what each sheet had been: a ledger, a letter, a shirt. Worn, written on, carried and creased. Now all those uses had been rendered down and given back as blankness. Not emptiness, a clear field. For a moment that recognition rested in her chest. The day had written itself across her, lines of worry, smudges of stress, stray marks from other people's moods. And here she stood, watching how easily the mill made space for a new surface. A bell in the rafters rang once. The shift neared its end. PJ tested a few of the earlier sheets. Edges dry, centers nearly so. They rustled faintly when she touched them, the paper's first quiet voice. She took a handful from the line, careful not to crease them, and slipped them into a flat wooden carrier. The stack felt nearly weightless, a contrast to the heavy pulp from earlier. She grinned, headed down the stairs, through the warm air of the mill, and out the side door to the brook. Evening had deepened into soft blue. A few stars pricked the sky between the last threads of cloud. The water wheel kept its patient pace. PJ stepped to the edge where the bank flattened and the current smoothed. She knelt, set the carrier beside her, and drew out the top sheet. For a moment she simply looked. The faint weave of fibers, the clean, unmarked surface. Then she laid it on the water. The sheet rested as if on glass. Then the current took gentle hold. Fibers that had come together began to loosen again, this time in their own rhythm. The sheet thinned, edges softening, interior blurring. It didn't vanish at once. It relaxed. The structure it had held gave way, and the water welcomed each part into its wider flow. PJ watched until only a pale suggestion of it remained. Then even that became part of the brook's pattern. Small eddies, tiny bubbles, moving light. She lifted another sheet. In her mind, this one held an unfinished conversation she had replayed too many times. She placed it on the water and let the current take that too. The worry dissolved with the fibers, spreading out until it was too thin to cling to. Sheet by sheet, she gave the river the weight she no longer wished to carry. Old doubts, habitual anxieties, the crease of self-critique in her shoulders. The brook received everything the same way. It didn't keep count. It rolled each scrap forward, past the bend, past the stones, into distance. When the last sheet had gone, the carrier was empty. PJ turned it once in her hands, the lightness still surprising, and set it down. The sounds of the mill behind her seemed softer now, as if the building had settled for the night. The wheel turned. The brook moved. The whole scene arranged itself into an easy rhythm. She sat back, then eased onto the ground, hands braced behind her, face tilted toward the dim sky. Her thoughts felt simpler. Fewer rooms, more open doors. There would be new cloth tomorrow, new numbers, new conversations. The wheel would turn. The stones would grind. The vats would fill. The press would close. The sheets would hang and pale again. And when the day grew heavy, she knew the way back to this bank. For now, she listened to the water threading past, a steady, low murmur that held no demand. It sounded like release made audible. PJ closed her eyes and let that sound become the last shape the day would take. The end. As PJ sits by the brook, you might sense your own day easing as well. Picture whatever you carried here. The stray thoughts, the loops of worry, the sharp edges of the hours behind you, as pages laid flat and unmarked. Imagine placing each one on the surface of a calm, moving brook. Watch the fibers soften. Watch the forms let go. Watch the current gather and carry them beyond the bend until they blur into the wider flow. Beneath you, the bed holds steady, like the bank. Around you, a quiet like the mill at rest. Inside you, a simple rhythm remains. In and out, like water moving past stone. The work of the day is done. The wheel can turn without you for a while. The brook will keep going. You are free to remain still. Good night. As this episode comes to a gentle close and the world outside grows quiet, may you find comfort within your own meditation nest. Let your mind settle softly. May tranquility wrap around you, inviting deep rest and serene dreams until dawn. If you'd like to help keep the meditation nest aglow, please consider buying me a cup of coffee by visiting ko-fi.com/BethPodcast. Every small kindness helps the light travel a little further. You can also access a free weekly blog on substack.com. Check the show notes for links. Until we meet again, rest in the quiet knowing that you are safely held by the night.